Selena Hill, the Deputy Digital Editor at Black Enterprise, and I'm excited to be here with you at the Sisters Inc. Summit to talk about how to keep going when the going gets really tough. Joining me for this conversation are two esteemed panelists, Lia Easler, who is the AVP of Marketing at Nationwide, and Grace Eleyae, who is the co-founder of her self-named company, which is best known for creating satin-lined caps called slaps that are sold in major retailers like Macy's and Nordstrom. Thank you so much, ladies, for being here with us at the Sisters Inc. Summit.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so happy to be here.
Absolutely. So, Grace, resilience is given for entrepreneurs, but even the most dedicated entrepreneurs need extra motivation to stay the course at times. Mm-hmm. What challenges have you faced since you first launched your business in 2014?
Gosh, business is all about risk. And in 2014, when we first launched, the first thing that we needed to do was find out how we could actually get to customers. At the time, we were selling basically directly out of my parents' back house, and we didn't have a marketing channel yet. We didn't know how to reach out to customers. We couldn't go directly to stores because we knew that you couldn't put our slap against a $2 bonnet because people would wonder why it costs a little bit more. And then we couldn't put it into a Nordstrom right away because people would wonder why this beanie has satin on the inside. And so we knew that it was going to be an education process. And so we emailed 100 different YouTubers with a high following. But at the time, now we know, of course, they're known as influencers, but at the time we just called them YouTubers with a high following. And we only got 3 responses. One person said, no, thank you. One person said, not now. And the last person said, I've never heard of sleeping with satin, but go ahead and send it over to me. And a month later, we were rejoicing at getting 3 sales in a day. This is September 2014, rejoicing when we get 5 sales in a day. And then one day in October, we got 25 sales in one day, and then 50, and then 75. And we realized that the one person who said, I'd never heard of sleeping with satin, but go ahead and send it to me, had apparently done a video where she did a haul video, and then she was just wearing it in another one. And that was how we found our marketing channel. But it's funny because every problem that has come up, whether it's finance, first was actually financial, let's be real. We ended up having to use credit cards to fund our first manufacturing run, to fund our first photo shoot, every challenge that came, we just had to find solutions for it. And then the next one, of course, like I said, was the market. There's been so many, between product quality issues with manufacturers, to capital, like I mentioned, to not having enough human resources to actually get everything done. Running business literally is all about solving problems.
Absolutely. And Lia, in your profession as well, problem solving is something that you do as well. Can you talk about some challenges or hurdles that you faced in your career and that needed a problem solving type of mindset to tackle?
Absolutely. As I think about challenges, and let's face it, for business owners and as women, we are not immune to facing challenges. So we know that, whether it's lack of capital, fear of letting go of steady income. For us, it was commingling friends and family with business. I will tell you, 20 years ago, my husband had one foot in an e-greeting website for people of color, and we were both juggling that corporate life and working and really trying to make that work. It was stressful, painful at times, and for us, not sustainable. But when I think about the challenges and the problem solving, it really took sitting down and understanding what was the vision, trying to lay out a strategy for where we wanted to prioritize not just our individual goals, but what was our family plan and what was the path that we wanted to go on. So that problem solving really kicked in when it was time to make some tough choices. And as business owners, multiple income streams are great, But if you're running a full business, you need to build a strong foundation for that house to weather storms and remain standing.
Just staying focused on the vision. I think that for many people, that's what pushes us through on the hard days, is because we're like, okay, the end goal is the light at the end of the tunnel. Can you talk about how, why that was important, and what that vision really did for you guys?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Sticking true to your mission or vision is critical, because you will be tempted as a business owner to be all things to all people. And that is not something that's sustainable. And so if you understand what your market is, what your niche is, what your strengths are, it is important to stay true to that. If you start to veer off that path, what you will find is it's very hard to do the little and the big things well. And then later, that will impact your brand reputation, your ability to get more business and to grow. So it's something about staying the course and understanding where your lane is. Now, that does not mean that over time your strategy can evolve and you add to your business or you find new markets. But starting out especially, it is important to stay clear on your mission and vision.
Grace, I'm sure you can relate about staying clear, true to the course, focused on vision. When you first launched in 2014, did you envision your satin caps expanding into a lifestyle brand, making multi-millions of dollars and being featured in Sephora and Macy's? Was that the vision?
So I think we had you. It was more of a dream. There's this quote that I've heard that's vision without traction is just a hallucination. So it was a dream for sure. I remember when I first made the first prototype. That was February 2014. And I was talking to my brother, and years before, right when around the time when Shark Tank came out, I remember talking to him about, like, if I come up with an idea, will you help me scale it? Because he was running one of Amazon's 1 million square foot facilities, and he was great operationally. And so when fast forward to when I made the first prototype, and I call him and I'm like, hey, I think I have an idea that could work. And he's like, okay, how many do you think you can sell of these in a day? And I said, probably like 100 a day. And he was like, you think you can sell 100 of these in a day? And it was this like, okay, let's just see if this could work. And at the time, we were selling it on Etsy. I was making all of the slaps myself. And with my 2 sewing classes and very limited sewing experience, and I could probably make 2 in an hour or so, right? One took me about 30 minutes. That's without any sort of, cutting and preparing the fabric. And so that means in an 8-hour shift, I would have done 16. I'm basically saying that if I had done 100 a day at that time, I would have crumbled. I think it was a dream for sure. But I think that there was a lot that needed to happen in order for us to set up the structures and to gain the traction to actually reach and achieve the dream that we had. And I think the vision is something that's so important in order for you to stay focused. And it does evolve over time, as Lia mentioned. It definitely evolves over time. But it's so important to also have a vision so that you have something that's bigger than yourself that you're working toward. When we were growing really fast, especially in those first 3 years, and it felt like we were driving a race car, but also trying to change the tires at the same time. It was just putting out fires at all times. As soon as you plug up one hole on the ship, another hole pops up and water's coming in. As soon as you plug that one up, another, it's coming up from the ground. And it just felt like problems were happening all over the place. But again, as we continued just solving each problem that was right in front of us, we kept going, and were able to achieve that. What started as a dream and a vision became a reality.
Grace, when you said that the first 3 years, it seemed to be most challenging. I know you scaled very quickly. Is that one of the reasons why it was so challenging? And when you talked about all those little fires that you had to put out, like what were you referring to?
Sure. So in those first 3 years, again, we were growing, we were scaling really quickly. And so, we we're also bootstrapped. We didn't have a lot of access to capital. We weren't going into banks weren't agreeing to give us a lot of money, especially because we were e-commerce and we didn't have huge receivables that we could say, hey, leverage this, please give us money. And so we didn't, it was always one huge challenge that we used to have is, do we spend money to market the product, or do we buy inventory? So on the times when we would say, let's buy inventory, now we're overloaded on inventory, but we don't have any money to sell it. Then we'd switch it up and we'd go hard selling because we have so much inventory. Let's go hard selling. And now we run out of inventory. And so we did this dance for a while, completely bootstrapped. Sometimes, of course, we'd have to get high interest, high remittance loans that required us to pay back a huge sum very quickly. But it would be the things that got us through those really difficult times where we had to make those choices. And that's just one example of how when you're scaling quickly, you really have to make tough choices. And we also were doing everything. A lot of us were wearing different hats within the business. You know, we talk about how every single person in my family currently or previously have worked for the business. You know, even my nephews, when they were, you know, young, would come in and help us pack and in Christmas seasons, I'm back there. Even up until just a couple of years ago, I was back there shipping, especially during the Christmas season, you know, and you just learn how to just keep running no matter what.
Yeah, just keep moving. I love that you said that. Lia, can you talk about or give some examples of some obstacles that maybe have seemed insurmountable that you faced and how you overcame them?
Absolutely. As I think about one experience, there was a group benefits business that, you know, I had the privilege of leading, and at the time, this business was not profitable. And I think as business owners, you know, many of us, and certainly in hearing Grace's story in terms of those early years, you know, you find yourself in that space, as she mentioned, you know, driving the car and trying to change the tires. The talent challenges, whether it's having enough people or turnover, just all of those things, I would say was a perfect storm, and it seemed like an insurmountable obstacle. And what I found, creating that vision, thinking about what was the future state, what do we want this business to look like, and setting smart goals, those are the things that, you know, helped us to achieve milestone after milestone. And I will tell you, whether it was addressing compensation, you know, making sure that we had the right people and the right seats on the bus, renegotiating rates with some of the vendors that we did business with. And so really looking for those opportunities to streamline the processes and just really thinking strategically about how to manage the business, how to make sure that all of the inefficiencies were addressed. And I will tell you, after almost 8 years of unprofitable results, that business achieved its first profitable year in 2018 and then also in 2019. And then, you know, we enter the pandemic, and so certainly had to, you know, pivot the business strategy. But I will tell you, it seemed insurmountable at the time. But when you stay the course, you lay out the vision, you set goals, and celebrate those milestones each step of the way, those are the things that will get you through and lead to, you know, that resilience and that muscle building that business owners need to thrive.
Amazing. Grace, you know, I love that Lia talked about setting not just goals, but smart goals, celebrating milestones each and every step of the way. Can you talk about some of the goals that you set out incrementally throughout the course of your business?
Sure. So we do a lot of, we call them rock setting. Now, first of all, I love that you talked about celebrating milestones. When we first started, it was a lot more difficult because, like I said, we were running so fast. It was a lot more difficult to celebrate those milestones. Every time people ask, oh, what would you do differently? I would always say, I would go back. If I could go back in time, I would actually take a breath. You know, I asked the question, what would you do if success was inevitable? And I would have taken more pictures. I would have celebrated more milestones. We don't have any pictures of us all shipping or packing or answering customer service emails, all from the back room of my parents' house. We don't have any pictures of that because we were so focused on not drowning and making sure this boat stayed afloat. So definitely celebrating milestones. But a lot of the goals, it would start with just revenue goals. revenue targets that we would try to hit. And like I said, for the first few years, we were exceeding those month over month. And it became hard to even forecast. We had to all be very comfortable with uncertainty, because we would try to forecast, and if we were off in any way, then we don't have enough inventory, or we're falling short. We have too much inventory. It was difficult to forecast, especially in those beginning years. And so we tried to make sure that our goals surrounded more, like Lia said, more measurable things in our landscape. So it might have been to make sure that product quality was above par, that we had excellent product quality. It might have been in 2017, for example, one of our goals was to go from that product-based business that was just a slap based business to a brand, and actually branding Grace Eleyae. And that was a huge goal. And that, of course, took resources and time and energy and different things that were competing with especially our finances at the time. But we ended up accomplishing that goal. And once we started setting, I played tennis. Tennis became my pandemic activity, and I'm obsessed with it. But one of the things that I realized is, if I'm not getting my serve in, I can't tell my mind, get the serve in, just get the serve in, because that's not going to work. But if I say, watch your form, make sure your racket drops, keep your head up, don't lead with your arm, follow through. If my goals are about hitting the right form, the serve just goes in. And so we try to make sure that our goals are that, making sure operationally we have our shipping window is being met. Operationally, we try to make sure that everyone in the company has some sort of measurable that they're working toward, so that everyone is cohesively working toward the goals together.
You've both touched on COVID, and that was a huge challenge, even now with the ongoing pandemic. Lia, can you talk about some of the challenges that you faced during COVID and how you pushed through?
Yes, certainly going through COVID, and even now, as we think about talent, our resources, making sure that we're caring for our associates. Certainly you want to be able to get the work done, but we want to make sure that we are caring for our people just as much as our customers. And that's the thing where I think working remotely and making that pivot. Grace touched on quality, the importance of making sure that we can deliver on our promise for customers while giving associates everything that they need to be successful wherever they're working, whether that's in office or at home in a hybrid environment, and making that pivot so quickly for us. So proud of Nationwide and being able to do that and deliver, especially during times where people were worried about the ability to pay their premiums. People were worried about, paying for housing, certainly contracting COVID. Lots of customers and associates even asking questions about life insurance and wanting to understand what some of those protections, are that they perhaps didn't have in place. And for business owners, I will tell you that was also key as people began to think about succession planning and what happens to me if and what happens to my business if I get sick, or if I'm unable to, wear the many hats that we wear, as business owners. So those are some of the things that we really had to help customers and associates navigate through, and talking about the value of getting protection in place to do some of those things in the event that something were to happen with COVID. So taking care of people, taking care of our customers, and trying to make sure that we had protection in place. Those were the things that I focused on.
Amazing. Grace, did you have to pivot at all your business strategy or model during COVID?
Well, we were pretty blessed in that we were primarily e-commerce up until 2020. And so we actually were perfectly poised to continue more safely. Of course, we had to put in a lot of safety precautions and distancing and all of that in our warehouse, but we were already poised to actually continue selling through COVID, because we didn't have a brick and mortar retail location, and we weren't selling to brick and mortar at the time. We were selling direct to consumer. So in terms of marketing and business strategy, we didn't have to pivot too much. But in terms of office dynamics and making sure, again, that we kept people safe. Like Lia said, we had to go to a hybrid model, or really just everyone went home that could. And so the challenge was for us to stay still interacting and not to get into silos where marketing is doing one thing and one arm is moving this way and one arm is moving that way, and we're splitting our focus without even realizing it. And so we had to implement daily huddles where we all came on Zoom or Google Meet to make sure we're discussing numbers, and marketing had to know what operations was doing, which had to know what finance was doing and development. And so we all had to make sure that we synced up on a daily basis. And so our meeting cadence became very important in order for us to stay on the same page. And that was really the biggest challenge, was keeping the team cohesive.
And you said meeting cadence. How often did you guys meet?
So every single day we would have a 15 to 30 minute huddle where the whole team got together and we talked through a specific document that was all of the metrics that we're trying to hit. We call it the plan to actual. So what the plan was for marketing spend, for development that day, production that's coming in, or warehouse transfers that were happening. And we all talk through that so that everyone kind of stays on the same page.
I'm so happy that you mentioned that, because communication is key in businesses as well as in life. And we all had to adjust during the pandemic. I want to actually, take some time to explore how important it was to continue the team building aspect during COVID to make sure business is successful. Lia, for you as well, like how did you guys continue to make sure that everyone was in alignment, and what mechanisms did you put in place during COVID to keep the team aligned?
Yes, I will tell you that we've had associates that have been work from home or hybrid for many, many years. And so although this was new for some, leaving the office and working at home, using things like video chat and some of the resources that we've had, we just did more of that. And historically, we've talked about the importance of engaging a remote team, when you have people co-located across the country or at home versus in office. But for us, it was really a matter of making sure that we doubled down on investing in team building and coaching, and what are the ways to keep people engaged when you're having a conversation both in office and you have people remote. And so making sure that you're allowing that space and facilitating those conversations so that no one is excluded. So it really was a matter of sharpening those skills and making sure that, we could do virtual happy hours or team coffee chats and one-on-ones. And so really just trying to connect with people in the ways that, felt safe and made people comfortable. As you think about coming into the office versus wearing a mask, who's vaccinated, who's not vaccinated, but just really trying to connect on the things that make us nationwiders. And that was really the focus for customers, the focus on each other, and just cameras on. And making it okay. You didn't have to, dress up. You're working at home. Let's do what makes sense. And I will say that timing is everything. So, Grace, certainly during this pandemic, I discovered, your business and many others as, they couldn't get to, the salon or do different things. And so I'm interested to know, did your business grow during that time period? Because, I will say for many of our businesses here at Nationwide, people were thinking about their coverage, thinking about what's important in life. And, in many cases that meant more insurance or different coverages, or just understanding the protection they had in place. So interested to know if you saw some pandemic purchases positively impact your business.
Definitely. We saw a huge uptick. That was still one of our best years to date because of what you just said. A lot of people weren't able to get to the salons. A lot of people were at home lying down on the couch or sitting down against headrests and thinking about maybe protecting their curls. And then, of course, we were already e-commerce. So it really was a perfect storm. We were really blessed to be in the position we were in.
Yeah, timing is everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Grace, as mentioned, you launched your headwear company in 2014. It's since expanded into this multi-million-dollar lifestyle brand. What are some tools or resources that have helped you push through during the expansion of your company?
Sure. So one really practical tool. So there are two operating systems that we kind of um, subscribed to for a little while. One was called Scaling Up. It's a book by Vern Harnish that is all about creating, they call it the one-page strategic plan that details your whole business on one big, huge page. A kind of simplified version of that that's a little bit more entrepreneurial, in my opinion, is something called Traction, or the Entrepreneurial Operating System. That's really helped us. We've brought in coaches and implementers from both systems. And I also recommend that, especially if you're working with close relationships in your business. It really helps to have a third party that's completely unrelated, that can help mediate conversations. Because it can get a little bit personal without realizing it when you're working with close relationships. So yeah, coaches, those two operating systems have really helped us to kind of hone in and organize our whole organizational structure. And then even in just the difficult times, there's a saying that I always like to remember, and that is, fear and faith have the same thing in common, in that they both require you to believe something that hasn't happened yet. And so whenever it gets really difficult, it's like the fear is like the fearful future is the one that usually is bombarding us and saying you're gonna fail, you're gonna file for bankruptcy, whatever the wording might be. And then there's this little glimmer of, what if it doesn't end up like that? Or what if something does work out, that you have to really attach yourself to. When there's many moments in the growth journey where I would literally I have what I call my mountain. I live in a very hilly area. And so I would literally drive up this hill that has a pretty good view. And I would literally look out and see that car that was taller than me just 5 minutes ago now looks like a little toy. I literally get perspective so that I can get perspective. I'd force myself to get high, whether a skyscraper, in my case, a hill, so that I can see that it's actually small if I just change my view. And the same thing with this problem. It's in front of me, it looks huge and it's overwhelming. But really, if I just get a little bit higher in my thinking, it's really small, and I can handle this if I just break it down one thing at a time.
Oh, I love that. Lia, I'm sure you can speak to the topic as well.
Yes, I was nodding my head and smiling as Grace, went through that and talking about faith and fear. And for me, definitely faith first. When I find myself in that moment of feeling overwhelmed, or how will we get through this? It's a matter of just stopping and just asking God to grant me peace of mind, to be able to think clearly, to just ground myself and just take that moment so that we don't work ourselves into a frenzy. When you think about, as women and as business owners, we are caring for so many different people, things, getting everything done, and often we put ourselves last on that list. So just really stopping to take that moment to ground myself in faith. And then if you let that doubt creep in, you have to stop it. And so one of the things that I do, I have a little box where I'll go and read old thank you notes or cards, or things where I've made a difference in the life or career, or supporting something, or whether it's a cause or a person, to just refill my tank and get rid of those little whispers of doubt, and then get ready to take it step by step, going back to those SMART goals. And I'm sure everyone has a squad, whether it's your informal board of directors, but someone that I could go to from a sounding board standpoint, who will listen, provide guidance, referrals, whatever it is that I need. I have a person for it, and they'll give me feedback. And so you have to have those people in your corner that won't just tell you what you want to hear, but will pour into you and hold you accountable. And for me, it's just making sure it's faith and the squad.
Amazing. Again, thank you so much for that. Before we end, I do want to just ask you ladies to leave our audience with any advice, motivation, or tools, or resources when it comes to remaining resilient as entrepreneurs.
Sure, I can start. So It sounds cliche, but it really is important for you to just keep going. Oh, even before that, get started, then keep going. When I first made the first prototype, it's really easy to get into analysis paralysis, where you want to make sure that it's perfect. You don't want anything to be wrong with it before you launch it to the world. But I would say start now. You're at your low, you're right now is the moment that you have the least amount of risk. The higher up you go, whether it's in age or children or employees or revenue, the more risk you're taking on. And so right now it's actually the least risky to launch the thing that you want to do. So I would say get started. And when you get into it, even when it gets hard, just keep going. I don't think it's the smartest people or the best ideas that are the ones that make it the farthest. It's just the person who didn't stop when it got hard. And so I would just say continue, just keep going. Sometimes it will be difficult to see, but just solve the problem that's right in front of you. Start there, then solve the next one, then the next one. And suddenly you'll see, oh, I actually made it to the goal. I made it. So I encourage you first to get started. And then when it gets difficult, just to keep going, because you got this, you can do it.
You got it. Thank you so much for that, Grace. Lia, can you leave us with some parting words on staying resilient?
Absolutely. In addition to what Grace offered, certainly stay true to your mission, similar to what we talked about earlier. Commit to doing the little and the big things well. And then chase your dream with the full knowledge that some people may not understand it, believe it, or even support it. But that's why it's your dream. So continue to push through and set yourself toward those goals.
Again, thank you, ladies, so much for the insight and inspiration you shared here with us at the Sisters Inc. Summit. Thank you so much for being here with us and the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Selena. This was great.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us for the 2022 Sisters Inc. Summit. We couldn't have done this without our lineup of amazing women. So thank you to our speakers and to our sponsors, MasterCard, Nationwide, and Walmart. For more great content created just for women entrepreneurs, check out the Sisters Inc. podcast every other Wednesday at noon Eastern Time on blackenterprise.com, our social media channels, or your favorite podcast platform. We hope you'll join us later this month for our virtual town hall, HBCUs Developing Top Tech Talent, on November 10th. We'll be back in December with our 40 Under 40 virtual summit on December 8th. And if you're planning ahead, registration is now open for the 2023 Women of Power Summit, March 9th to 11th in Las Vegas. If you're watching us right now on social media, remember to share your favorite session using the hashtag SistersInc. And there's still time to register for this event on blackenterprise.com, which gives you access to all of today's sessions on demand for the next 30 days. If you're already registered, don't miss our live workshop, Cybersecurity Tips for Entrepreneurs, brought to you by MasterCard and starting right now. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.